Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, we're discussing a rare watch, or it's a rare version of a rare watch. Patek Philippe launched the 5980 Nautilus Chronograph in 2006, discontinued the steel standard variant for the 5990 travel time chronograph in 2014. Now, in 2012, the model we see here was launched. This is the 5980 1A-019. It was made in model years 2012 and 2013 before being discontinued alongside the other steel 5980s for the 5990. Now we know that in 2012 and 2013, not all versions of the 5980 were this silver white dial model. So a short production span and segmented production means this is a rare beast. It's also a lovely watch. In steel, 40.5 millimeters in diameter, 12.5 millimeters thick. Just the case, lug to lug, is 45.4 millimeters. But whether you put it on a strap or keep it on the bracelet, you're going to keep these intermediate links out here. So the distance across the wrist, if we include the intermediate links, it's a larger but still manageable 51.1 millimeters. Now I'll throw the watch on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference. It wears beautifully. It's definitely thicker and more massive than something like a 5711, but I would say it wears approximately like a 5726 annual calendar. So if you've worn that, you know how this is going to feel. The watch wears well enough that I think you could probably get away with it on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters in circumference. The bracelet isn't as stiff or inclined to flare as something like a 41 millimeter Royal Oak, and you can see that with its sloped case flank and sub 13 millimeter thickness, it will fit underneath a tight sleeve or dress cuff. Now, when I say the bracelet's not as stiff as a Royal Oak, I mean really only one link wants to flare out on each side, so it doesn't add a lot of virtual span across the wrist. The bracelet, as ever with the Nautilus, is gorgeous and integrated. Since the very first example, penned by designer Gerald Genta in 1976, the flow of the wings into the case, into the lugs, into the bracelet has been a huge part of the appeal. Genta was a jewelry designer, and he always liked to say that his favorite designs in the watch world mirrored the kind of ideas that animated his imagination in the jewelry world. And so the Nautilus and the Royal Oak both designed as a sort of bracelet that happened to have a timepiece attached. You can see that the finishing is quite fine with little polished bevels on the edges of the links, satin on the outer faces. We have primaries, which are tapered down from lugs, and then intermediates, which you'll note are also tapered and polished. We have removable links fixed by pins and sleeves, which is a durable system, but it does make sizing a bit tougher. You'll need a block and a punch at home in order to be able to size this. You can see that Patek uses a double fold clasp here, and it is a sequential close with a clamshell. But take note, they're using little ceramic spring-loaded pin snaps, so over time the action of the clamshell can't wear down the pin snap, so the tolerance will remain crisp over time, so that's nice to see. And of course we have the Calatrava cross on that little clamshell lock. The underside of the clasp is actually curved to match the underside of your wrist, which is a nice detail. We roll back to the case, and there is a lot of fine detailing, including this little rolled bevel that runs along the shoulders of the lugs. Now you can see the Nautilus case in all of its forms has always been more complex with more facets and components than an Aquanaut. That's part of the reason why the Aquanaut has always cost less almost across the board. You see polished bevels, you see satination alongside polish, and then we have this three-piece case with a case back, a mid-case, and then a bezel structure with these wings that locks into place on the side. The chronograph pushers have also been nicely integrated. They don't really break up the iconic profile of the Nautilus too much, and most importantly, they don't compromise the 120-meter water resistance of the timepiece. It still has a screw-down crown. It is still 120 meters water resistant. It uses the same base movement as the 5960 annual calendar, so it shares that movement's use of pusher adjusters for the calendar displays. Now, this only has a date, but that date is adjusted by a little pusher on the case flank, so that's what you're looking at there. Now, the chronograph is a flyback. It's something that Patek doesn't really advertise too well, but this and the 5990, they're both flyback chronographs where we have a superimposed coaxial chronograph hour and minute display on the bullseye down at 6 o'clock. And then we have white gold hands and indices, which have been blackened for better contrast across the silver base. And one feature of the Nautilus that always struck me as better resolved than a Royal Oak, the Royal Oak has that faceted, rounded, polygonal bezel, but then the inner bezel, the crystal, and the dial are all just round. Whereas on the Nautilus, the outer bezel matches the inner bezel, matches the crystal, matches the dial. They all have the same rounded off faceting. We'll do a quick loom shot of the watch. As you can see, plenty of loom. And then we'll turn it over. Now on the reverse side of the watch, you can see a movement that also debuted in 2006 on the 5960. This is the 28520. 35 joules, unidirectional, automatic winding, unlubricated ceramic bearings, 55-hour power reserve. It has a free-sprung Gyromax style balance, which makes for both more precise adjustment and greater shock tolerance. This has been adjusted in 5 positions, which is the high horology and chronometer standard. You can see that the action is by means of a sort of column wheel, which means the chronograph is very crisp to operate. And then there's a vertical clutch, and if you look carefully at the seconds hand, when you start a vertical clutch, there's no jump or stagger because there's no toothed meshing in a vertical clutch, so there's no place. When you start the chronograph, it always starts without a jump or a stagger. Also, if you like to leave your chronograph running, you can do that here. This watch features a chronograph that, because of the vertical clutch, will not induce any additional wear or tear on your watch when it is engaged. Get really close to the movement now. You can see an anti-magnetic Spiromax silicone hairspring, and you can see that the finishing is to a high standard. And while it does include an element of mechanical finishing and manual finishing, at some companies like JLC, FP Journe, and Audemars Piguet, the balance is on the mechanical side of finishing, whereas here the finish, the last step for each process is clearly manual, which results in a very pleasing array. And all this beating away at 28,800 vibrations per hour, and once again, a 55-hour power reserve. There is just lots to love in this movement. This watch is stacked. So reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. I've got a little pro tip for you guys who might be a little bit burned by the fact that there is no hacking seconds on this movement. Well, when the chronograph's not running, you can see it's a fairly dead dial, but I just told you that with the vertical clutch, you can leave your chronograph running full time. So you set the watch, you zero reset it using the flyback, and now you're synchronized, and you just treat that center seconds for the chronograph as the seconds companion to your hours, minutes, and yes, your seconds. So while it doesn't have a zero reset, you can effectively use the chronograph flyback as exactly that. Again, reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.